I know we had our break, our lunch go a little longer than usual, so our next break will be a little bit later. So if you guys would tolerate one more fabulous presenter, it's Dr. Perry Hoffman, correct? Your voice is strong enough to do this, Perry? Just checking. Okay. So Perry, I've known since 1995, actually, when Jill Rathis and I were trying to adapt BPD for Adolescents, and our old friend who we lost several years ago, Cindy Sanderson, came down, and Cindy said, oh, if you're going to do work with adolescents, you have to talk to Perry Hoffman, because she is the world's expert on working with families at BPD. So Perry came down and taught us right from the outset, early on, how to consider involving families with adolescents. It was extremely helpful, and we feel a debt of gratitude many years later. So thank you for all that, Perry. She's now, as many of you know, the president of the National Education Alliance for BPD. She is a staunch advocate. She is going to Congress. She is fighting the good fight, and she is so exhausted from fighting that she practically lost her voice. But she's strong enough to get up here and do one more performance before she takes a rest for the weekend. So Perry, come on up.
Thanks, Alec. I might have to radically accept I won't make it through, so I brought Jim all up, because Jim knows the data as well as I do. So here we go. What makes this disorder so hard for families? As Alec said, I've been working with families, well, it's almost 25 years. And when I started working with families, I realized how hard this disorder was for those impacted by a loved one. I used to work with families who had a relative with schizophrenia, and found this actually much more painful for the families. And early on in my work, Marcia, who was a mentor of mine, said, well, you've got to meet one guy, you have to meet Alan Frizzetti. So many years ago, I had the good fortune of meeting Alan, probably 15 years ago, and he and I have been great friends and colleagues since then. And those of you who know Alan know he's the man behind validation, and he's the one who set the tone for validation for families. So a lot of what you see and hear today is thanks to his work. I also want to let you know our cameraman is his son. Couldn't get out today, so that's it. So what actually makes this disorder so difficult for families? And perhaps Time Magazine said it the best about 2 years ago. There was an article, it was on Marcia, and up in the corner of the byline it says, borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality, the disorder doctors fear the most. Well, if this doesn't say a lot to families, I don't know what does. Also, there was an article written in the mid-1980s that was not focused on borderline patients, but it tried to identify what was most stressful for professionals when working with family members, when working with patients, and the three were suicide attempts, threats of suicide, and patient anger. Certainly sounds like our community of patients. What I wanted to do, as I said, I worked with families who had a relative with schizophrenia, and I really wanted to see my intuition and my experience said that this disorder was more difficult for our families. And I had the good fortune to be hooked up with a man named Elmer Strumming, who many years ago was doing a lot of work with families, and he had done a survey where he evaluated families who had a relative with Axis I disorders, primarily schizophrenia, and he had given them a series of tests and questionnaires. And I used the same questionnaires and gave it to our families who had a relative with borderline personality disorder. And this is actually what we found. And I'm sure most of you probably think, except now that we're all in the borderline world here, is that schizophrenia is a prototype of mental illness. God knows it's not the illness you want to get. So when you think about our families compared to those families, I think this data is striking. Levels of grief are not any different. So people have a relative with primarily schizophrenia versus borderline, same levels of grief, same levels of depression. But actually the stigma for the borderline family community is higher, and the levels of burden for families with a relative with BPD is higher. And I think the data speaks for themselves. Those of you who are family members could probably say you could have told us that without having to do any research. So why is borderline personality disorder more stressful? Because it's a disorder that exists in the context of relationships, and that's really the key. So if it's a disorder about relating, then how could it not be more difficult in families? That's not to say if you have a relative with schizophrenia and their hallucinations and other symptomatology isn't difficult for the family, but it's not directed towards the family, and it's not in the context of the relationship. Here's some data, research that I did that I thought was very interesting. I was curious to see how patients and families see each other. So I gave them actually Dr. Henry referred to this instrument before. It's called the NELPI. And what it does is it assesses personality traits. It's a 180 or 225 item questionnaire, depending on what version we use. And the person rates themselves, and so their personality traits then get scored. Well, there's also a version where you can rate somebody else. So what I did was I had the patient rate themselves, and I had the patient rate their family member. I had the family member rate themselves, and the family member rate the patient. So each person filled out 4 questionnaires, and this is what I found. That when comparing the perceptions of the patients, actually family members and patients were very much in sync. There was not a lot of difference in how they self-perceived or the family member perceived the patient. The difference, however, was in how the patient saw their family member. The patient saw their family members as being more neurotic and more on the subscales of that neuroticism, saw the family member as being higher than the family member saw themselves. So when we talk about trying to accept different perceptions and what goes on in families, here's one glaring fact that happens, is the different perceptions that they have, the patient and the family member have about the family member.
Okay.
When I can't love you, just jump in. Another thing I wanted to understand, because this study was done in the early 2000s, was what were families reading on the internet? And I think those of you who remember back then, remember what it was like. Everything was hopeless. Forget it, this is the disorder that doesn't get better. So I wanted to actually see if family members were reading about the disorder. How did that impact their attitudes towards their relative? And this got a little switched. And this was a paper that came out of that. What I found was that the more knowledge a family member had, the higher their hostility towards their relative. The higher their level of burden, the higher their subjective burden, the higher their own level of depression, and their overall sense of well-being was higher. So in other words, ignorance was bliss. What were parents worried about? And mostly worried about the patient's future. Also the intensity of the family frictions, and those of us who have relationships with people with BPD, we know that the anger can get very intense. And also the misunderstandings can also create the intensity. The relatives' impact on their own ability to concentrate, their level, they had to take more sick days. They weren't able to go forward in their careers in the same way. They were also worried about the upset in the household routine, and also fear that their own behavior would make the patient worse. And finally was how much the patient had changed. So this is sort of in the order of prevalence of what family members worry about, both in terms of burden. So that all being said, where do families actually fit into the picture? Dr. John Gunderson and I co-edited a book that came out in 2005, published by the American Psychiatric Association. And Dr. Anthony Bateman, who is, along with Peter Fonagy, the mainstay and the founders of mentalization. Dr. Bateman wrote a endorsement of the book, and I think I sort of look back now. I wasn't realizing it then, but I think this was the turning point in the sense of that period of when families were finally coming into being. And I'll read you what he says. Families, friends, and caregivers of people with borderline personality disorder have long been neglected by mental health professionals. Blamed, censured, stigmatized. They've been relegated to the anteroom of treatment, rarely being considered as a positive force to be harnessed for effective intervention. And to me, this very well sums what NEA BPD has tried to do, and that is to involve families and also to take away the stigma and the blame and the shame. So in the meeting this morning so supported that, and I feel like standing up and cheering and saying yes, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. These families are not to blame. These people come into the world with certain vulnerabilities, and sometimes there's just not a good fit. On the other hand, in the dialectic, I don't want to ignore that some people have been abused, and some families have maybe done the best they could, but it was also harmful. So I must say, I have to say in my personal experience, those families don't come. You don't get them to come into treatment. So by and large, the families that come and are in our Family Connections programs are not the families who have sort of helped build a reputation that really needs to be redefined. So now we look at the importance of family members and data. In the 1950s, there was a construct called expressed emotion that came out of England, and it was used with family members who had a relative with schizophrenia. And what they found was that they interviewed the family member before the patient was discharged from the hospital. And what they found was, in terms of the patient, the family member's attitudes and beliefs towards the ill relative, if they were more critical, more hostile, or what was called more emotionally over-involved, the patient did not do as well. This construct, which is also called EE, became an outcry, got an outcry from NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Excuse me, because NAMI felt families were being blamed. But that really wasn't the goal. The construct then went on to be used with a lot of other disorders. And the findings were similar. The more critical, the more hostile, or the more involved, the less well the patient did.
I just had a flashback. I remember when I had just delivered a major presentation at an organization, when the boss came by and he said, you know, those are great slides. He said, but why did I get the feeling that you were looking at those for the first time that the rest of the audience was? Anyways, I think certainly the conclusion here is that borderline personality disorder really is different. It's different in many ways, and we find with the EOI, expressed over emotion, that as opposed to schizophrenic patients, people with borderline actually do better when the family is involved, more involved. Obviously, the kind of involvement we have can make situations better or worse, but yet that was the outcome of this study. I think it's very interesting. Keep going. You're going to try?
I also want to note that the word over is in quotes, because I think when you have a child, you can't be over-involved. I mean, I appreciated what Dr. Hoffman was talking about with his son. I mean, you know, as parents, whether we have a child with a mental illness or not, something's not in sync. Our hearts go out to our children. I have a dear rabbi friend who says you're as happy as your least happy kid. And I think that, you know, sometimes families are blamed for being too emotionally over-involved. So I appreciate the data on this to support that we need to recognize the families and their need to be close to the child. As Mary Zenerini said actually in this room 9 years ago, she said, who else is going to stay the course with someone with mental illness, it's the family members. So this was sort of the impetus that led NEA BPD, and I just want to give you a little history. We're a not-for-profit organization, and another co-founding member here is Dixie Penny, who without her presence, nothing would have happened. I never heard of a 5013C, but Dixie, she knew it all. We went to lawyers, we did lots of good stuff, and we got chartered by the Board of Regents of the state of New York. We were co-founded by 4 family members, 2 consumers, and 1 mental health professional, an all-volunteer organization, and all our funding and donations go directly to support programs. We don't pay anybody's salary, we don't pay any rent, we don't pay overhead, we pay a phone bill, website. I think that's it. So what was the need to start this organization? Well, several of us, including Dixie and Trish Wimmer, who's the mainstay of getting all these things to happen, we were at a meeting at Rockefeller University in July of 2000. I have the wrong date, it was 2001. And we sat there and we were listening to probably the best researchers in the world talking about the research. And so we started to think, well, gosh, if all this research is here now, when will families hear about it? And those of you who submit articles for publication, it takes several years for anything to get in the literature. So we were thinking, so here's all this wonderful data, and families won't hear about it until it's past data. So we decided, you know what, maybe we could form an organization and start to make a difference. So we actually met down. I worked for 20 years at New York Presbyterian Hospital. We actually had our first meeting there, and on August 20th, 2001, about 15 days before 9/11, we were formed. And we actually, Dixie knew, she said, you know what, at one point decided, well, so how are we going to get this organization off the ground? And I said, I think if we did a conference, because a conference is an organizing event, and Dixie said, well, if we do a conference, we can submit a grant to SAMHSA. So the deadline was September 10th, the day before 9/11. Well, we worked all through the night. I mean, it really was something. We submitted the grant. We got the highest score you could ever get, and we didn't get funded. So that being said, we kept on moving. But the other impetus for starting the disorder was that NAMI at that time did not take BPD under its mission umbrella. Also the lack of awareness on the disorder, which still is today, the sense of hopelessness and the sense of stigma. Those were all the organizing things that brought us to forming this organization. And just as a little aside, we were all in my office that day, and we all went to a cafeteria, ladies' room, whatever, and we all came back. We said, I just saw a ladybug. And someone else said, I just saw a ladybug. So all of us had seen ladybugs in different parts of the hospital. So we decided that must mean something. And for those of you who know, our logo has a ladybug. I never go without a day without wearing a ladybug. Many of us in the audience here have ladybugs, because the ladybug is a symbol of hope. Actually, a young woman came up to me before and she said, do you want to see my tattoo? And I'm not big on tattoos. She showed me her tattoo, it was a ladybug. She said, because I heard this is the symbol of hope. So that was our beginning. This is our mission statement. Is to raise public awareness, provide education, and promote research on borderline personality disorder, and enhance the quality of life of those affected by this serious mental illness. And I think if there's one thing that I can say has been the engine for this organization, has been the passion behind it. Everybody who's been committed to it, I mean, the passion knows no end. Family members who sign on to the Family Connections program and become leaders. I mean, my God, we have people here from Los Angeles who threw a gala out in Los Angeles on the lot of Seinfeld Studios in the fall. I mean, it just, Matt and Ann are people from Connecticut. It just doesn't stop. We have some folks from New Jersey. We have people all over the country who have taken the passion and made a difference. So what have we done? Well, we didn't get that SAMHSA grant, but what we did was we resubmitted the application to the National Institute of Mental Health, and we even hit the jackpot. SAMHSA funded it, would have funded for 1 conference, and IMH funded it for 5 conferences. So we had 5 years of funding to run conferences. And thanks to Trish Wilbur and some other people in Dixie, we took that money, we took on one conference, and we leveraged it in. So if you think that we got 1 grant for 5 years, and we got another grant for 3 years, we had 8 years of funding. So we should have had 8 conferences, but we leveraged the money into 42 conferences because all we do. Because we don't pay people. So, you know, we're up and Trish and the families are up doing the work. And so we just get any money that comes in from a conference goes on to the next one. We have a website. As you see today, we audio and video all of our conferences and we post them on our website. And so people can go on, we don't charge for anything, okay? So people go on our website and they can download all the past conferences. Hopefully this conference will be up by, I don't know, Sam, Monday or Tuesday. So people will get to listen to it. What we've also started to do is start to run courses. We've done, and we're doing it again this year at the American Psychiatric Association convention, is that we run workshops for residents. If there's going to be any way to stamp out the stigma, it's going to address it in the professionals. So thanks to Brian Palmer, who's a colleague of Dr. Zanarini's, we have put in and did a few years ago a 2-day workshop for residents. The first day, the room was probably 3/4 filled. Then they came back for a second day. Well, the word must have gotten out because we were then standing room only. And we're doing it again this year. And the speakers are Dr. John Oldham, who's president of the American Psychiatric Association, Dr. John Gunderson, who we've heard named multiple times today, who I would like to think is the father of the disorder. Brian Palmer, Dr. Ken Silk, who's one of the leading names in medication, and then Jim Hall and I get to come and do our little bit. He presents as a family member, and I present as a professional working with families. And then also what we've done, thanks to our wonderful friends at McLean too, there's now been designed a CME course for psychiatrists where they can go through module by module, answer questions, and then get CME credits, which psychiatrists need each year. That is now being reformatted to fit the Harvard CME requirements. And the course that Brian, who basically did most of it, will now go up on our NEA BPD website to educate professionals, and it's really an outstanding course. We also have our call-in seminars. How many of you were on our call-ins? Okay, so this is free. This is every Sunday night. You have to send an email to neabpd@aol.com, and it's from 8 to 9, and each week we have a different professional. Last week we had Dr. Andrew Janin from Australia speak. Sunday night is Dr. Kelly Kerner, who's one of the leading people in DBT. We had the kickoff with Alan Verzetti in September. Alec Miller spoke, Blaise has spoken. I could just go through all these names. We have Dr. Lois Joy Kane speaking next week on mentalization with families, with Charlie Swenson, which leads me into my next thing. Charlie Swenson and I go back many years. There's some of us here from that same team at Cornell many years ago, including with Dr. Cindy Sanderson. And Charlie said he always wanted to do sort of like a talk radio show. And those of you who know Charlie know that he could do that. So he said, you know what, maybe I'll do something with NEA, and we'll do something similar to that. And I said, my gosh, that would be fabulous. So we decided, or he decided, maybe he'd team up with another professional. So he and Kelly Kerner are going to do a once-a-month seminar on Sunday nights, the 4th Sunday of every month for the next few months. It's not going to be on DBT per se, it's going to be on borderline personality disorder and other topics that are relevant to the disorder. So we're so excited about that. And again, all of this is always taped, posted on our website, also with all the handouts that come. We've also published 2 books, one of which I just mentioned with Dr. John Gunderson, and the other one is the first and only social work textbook on borderline personality disorder. It's actually an excellent book. It's not being marketed in the right way, so it's not being ordered the way it should. Excuse me, it's not really in any bookstores. So but it's excellent, and if you are interested in getting it, you can go to the Hayward Press website. We also have a video series that we've had the good fortune to work with Kevin Dawkins Productions, and I don't know if you all saw Kevin outside. It's a 5-part series. It's amazing what he's done. He went and lived in the home of 4 families for the weekend and just taped what went on. And actually, we have one family here who was generous enough to allow Kevin into her home. And the video is quite remarkable. You can go on our website and watch a trailer of it in case you're interested. And also you can download it for 2 weeks, I think for $19. And now this is the cornerstone of our organization, and this is our Family Connections program. This is a 12-week course that was designed primarily with Alan Frizzetti's work. We put it together late August 2002. We got Dixie and Tom Penny to be our first Family Connections leaders. I had the privilege of sitting in the back room and just watching how it went on and how the material took, and that was the beginning. We now have sites all over the country, never enough, and not in remote places in the country. So what we decided to do about 2 or 3 years ago was to offer the course by telephone. And now we have that happening now, where people from all over the country are on the same call. And when some of them decide to then become leaders and they come in for a training, it's like family. They get so excited, oh my gosh, that's you, and we talk for all these 12 weeks. So there's something very powerful in family support and families connecting together. We're also going to start, Marie-Paul Divandivier, who's not here this weekend because her family is in from France. She had the idea, on the waiting list, we have over 1,000 people. So she said, you know what, let's lower that waiting list. Let's put as many people as we can in on a course on the phone, even if they don't talk. We'll put them all on mute, but at least we can start teaching them the skills. So we're trying to get this out there in a larger place. But it shows the passion, again, of family members making a difference. We've already talked about the partnerships that we have. One is the NAMI. Also, we've done 2 public service announcements, one with Brandon. Someone else talked about this National Institute of Mental Health meeting that we had in 2010. And now we're starting to work with SAMHSA. Just for those of you who are not familiar with the way our government works, there's a research branch of the government, which is NIMH, and they do the research on things. And then there's the services branch, meaning that they provide services. Well, wouldn't it be nice if the research branch and the services branch work together? So this way you take the research and you translate it into practice. So we've been working with SAMHSA, who's been incredibly helpful. We hosted an all-day meeting there. Marcia Linehan was there, John Gunderson, John Holden. What was the Oh my gosh, Blaze was there, that's right. So you see there were a lot of important people there. But this is the beginning of an initiative. We're going to come up with 5 priorities for the disorder. And every time we ask SAMHSA to do something, they say yes. So we're very excited. We've also had 2 congressional briefings, one that resulted in the passing of House Resolution 1005, declaring May as Borderline Personality Disorder Month. And we're very proud to say that the American Psychiatric Association has just awarded NEA-BPD the Distinguished Service Award, which we'll be getting in Philadelphia at the next conference. Let me just quickly run through Family Connections. It's a 12-week multiple family group. It's community-based. The family members, parents, partners. It's based on DBT skills and strategies and Alan Frizzetti's work. We have a manual. Family members come in and are trained by NEA-BPD. Professionals now have asked to be trained, and the only stipulation we have is that they can run the course, but they can't charge for it. So, that's our mission is not to make money on these things, but to provide what people need. We provide the most current information, coping skills, strategies, which are individual, many DBT skills and family skills, and also the social support. Matt and Nan were talking about family members sharing their stories. Well, I always know what that first group is like. It's supposed to be 2 hours. Well, it is 2 hours, and then it's 2 more hours in the parking lot. Because families and members get so connected that they don't want to end the evening. We have 6 modules. I won't run for time. We've done 3 studies. We replicated the data 3 times, but I found very interesting that the retention rate in these groups has been, when we studied it was about 88%. That's incredibly high for family groups. And this is what we found, changes in grief, so pre and post, and the grief continued to go down. Change in distress or depression, pre and post, and didn't back up. It was not significantly different going down 3 months after. Burden, though, continued to go down. And this is great in that sense of mastery when family members are so disempowered. So when they get a sense that they know how to handle things, it changes things. This is the teleconnections course. And this is, I'm very excited about this. Because Alan Frazzetti goes a lot to Europe, people know family connections there, and he's trained up a lot of people. And some people invite him to come to their country, or they'll come to us when we do a training. So we did a training, and actually I have to give a real round of applause for New York Presbyterian Hospital. They give us free space to run our training. Every Sunday they give us a conference room so that our wonderful Costellos go in every Sunday, use conference room A, and it really is wonderful what they've done for us in terms of the program. But this is the program that then was taken to Ireland, so I just want to share some data on it. The results summary, and they sent me their whole slides, but what they found out, they replicated our data, that burden, grief, and depression levels decreased significantly, and the mastery levels increased. They did a control group, so they compared it to people who were getting something else, and the perceived burden levels decreased significantly, but there was no significant change in grief, depression, and mastery levels. I'm just going to, and they now, that was the first phase of a 3-year study. You know what, you didn't write, let me just finish, because we also have people in Sweden who what they need to use the curriculum for, or for family members whose relatives had made a suicide attempt. And what they found out was they replicated our data too. So now we are actually going to put in a grant to the New York State Office of Mental Health, whose big push now is for suicide attempters and whatever. But the message to me is that this program can work for more than just people with borderline personality disorder. So I thank you for bearing with me with my voice.